We are now live.
Good. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First order of business is approval of the May 27th, 2020 minutes. Are there any comments on that, or do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second? Anyone?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, as long as there's everybody all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. Public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have any members of the public that have any comments? I don't think we have anybody on the call.
At this time, we have one person in the attendee pool, Mr. Jack Swearington, but they have not indicated by raising their hand. If you do choose to make a public comment or want to be called on, there's a raise hand feature. If you click at the bottom of your screen on participants, you'll see a button that says raise hand, and you can raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak.
Okay, good. Doesn't appear that there's any comments, public comments. Discuss now the future of Citizens Oversight Committee. Who wants to, Aaron or Farhad, do you want to start in with this?
Sure, I'll take a good morning, everybody. Thank you for your continued service. We wanted to update you on the presentation we made to our board of directors at their September 2nd meeting. You all have that, the staff report as well as the minutes. So we thought we'd kind of circle back and check in with you and see if you have any additional thoughts and go from there. But to walk you through the staff report, the items that we need to manage are really 4 items. One is, what would we want this committee to be called? Then the scope and duties of the committee, the membership options we discussed, and the meeting frequency. So walking you through the process, we reported to the board that basically there are 2 types of organizations, and therefore, depending on which organization you look at, manage the citizens' input differently. So a planning agency like Transportation Authority of Marine or Sonoma County Transportation Agency, they're congestion management agency, they could be climate change, and they are transportation planning agency. So for them, having citizens' involvement is a different meaning than it would be for a transit agencies. And we walk the board through that process. On the page 2 of your staff report, you see what transit agencies, how many committees they have, what are the do's and the don'ts of the committee, as well as we reviewed what the 2 agencies are. And so for a transit agency like us, an operating transit agency, you basically want to make sure that you're in touch with the community, you hear back from them, as well as keep in touch with your passengers. So we walked the board through that process. We gave them many different options. Of course, the board decides what the name of the committee is, and that's one of the items we talked about. Then we talked about the duties, this is one area that we need to spend a couple of minutes. So, as you know, SMART is a special district. So as such, our charter by state law gives us the limitation of what we can do. And therefore, our general counsel says, therefore, any committee that we set up need to have specific tasks that is related to the charter and the function of SMART. The other thing is this committee, just like you are now, will be subject to the Brown Act, and therefore we need to have agenda items, we need to have staff report, we need to have recommended actions, And therefore, once again, you need to know what the issues and the duties are. As we expand the committee's role, our council says there is a high likelihood that you also need to start filling up all the compliance for different forms for conflicts of interest, as well as the financial forms that we in government have to file for you to indicate that you don't have a conflict. The next item we talked with the board was the membership and the process. And there is really, two ways of doing it. One is that we identify some organizations, and then those organizations, and you see that in page 4, this is an example. And on page 4, we said the board could say, okay, here are the organizations. And then in return, we go to that organization. Let's pick the first one, Friends of Smart, as an example. And they would have 1 seat or whatever number of seat the board chooses. But let's say 1 seat, we would ask Friends of Smart to give us 1 seat. Then we take that to the board, and the board would ratify and approve that. And then he or she, on behalf of Friends of Smart, would serve a specific amount of time. The second part is, no, you don't have a specific organization. You would try to have general areas, for example, knowledge of finance, being a passenger, knowledge of ADA, many different knowledge bases. And then based on that, the board will receive a larger pool, and then we go through the screening process, and the board would approve that. And finally, we discussed with the board that we like the committee to meet not less than twice a year, and hopefully more, maybe quarterly. And as once it's determined what the role is, then there are times that they will meet more often because of a particular item that comes up. So we presented these options, and the board, some of you were at the board meeting, the board discussed it. And basically the direction the board gave us was, first of all, we're not gonna make any changes till you all finish with the listening tour that we're doing in Marin and Sonoma, because they like to see what public, if they bring up any topics. And then they want us to go back to the board and start being more specific and give them ideas from you, from public and themselves. And I assume it will probably take the board a couple of meetings to start homing down into those specific items. Once we have all of those, then we will write bylaws, and then we will start the process, depending on what the board has decided, the process of recruiting committee members. So I'm gonna stop at this point and just be happy to answer any question. Aaron and I can just answer questions, but that's where we are. So if you wish, you can give us general comment. You can go back to the items 1 through 4, give us your specific feedback. And again, we will gather all the feedbacks and go back to the board when we finish with the listening tours. So that's it. I'll be happy to answer any question you might have.
Thank you, Farhad. Maybe, just put your hand up, and then we'll just kind of go around those that have questions. Peter, I see your hand up right away. So Peter.
Yeah, I've been giving this quite a bit of thought. It seems to me that the Citizens Oversight Committee is really one that is almost legally required by the ballot measure that's funding us. So I think the COC has a specific charge that I don't think we can water it down with listening sessions, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there's a Citizens Advisory Committee, because our responsibility is to look at the plan and to determine the financial viability of it. The other committees that are being suggested, which are probably all valid, are more like the listening sessions that are currently going on, where various organizations would just give input. But our committee is really responsible for reviewing the financial aspects and commenting on them. So I don't know if you can water that down in a larger committee that's talking about ADA, et cetera, et cetera. That's my thought on that.
Steve, you had your hand up.
Yes, I think Peter hits the nail on the head. And I think our experience with the listening committees suggests that there is a great deal of interest among the members of the public in having a more direct avenue of communication with the board or members of the board in a forum that is much different than the board meetings where the staff presents its report on a particular issue. The board members make their comments or ask questions. And then there is time for, quote, public comment, which is a one-way person stands up, makes his comment, doesn't get any feedback from any member of the board about it. And after 2, 3, or 10 comments are made, it goes back to the board. Nobody knows who responded how to which. And the public doesn't really get much confidence that they've been heard. So I think the listening sessions have been very successful in that the board members that are participating in that give immediate feedback to whoever the speaker is, and the speaker has a chance to clarify anything that was misunderstood or isn't what they intended. And I think my impression is that people leave those sessions quite satisfied that they have they've been heard, they've been informed if they were misinformed about something. It's a collegial, calm discussion. And I would go so far as to suggest that those listening sessions ought to occur a couple of days before every board meeting after the agenda is out, so that the public can have that opportunity apart from the formal board meetings, which are quite stilted and don't really give the public a chance to interact with the board. And I think the public is much more interested in talking with board members than they are in talking with an advisory committee or something of this sort.
Thank you, Steve. Julia?
Yeah, my only comment is giving the oversight committee. I do think it's important to give the oversight committee some rules and responsibilities, some issues, duties. I think that's one of our biggest problems is initially we had a role and a duty overseeing the plan, and then looking at it again, but we never felt like we had a lot of input, but we did oversee it. So I guess there was some validity there. But I do think one of the things that this memo brings up, and I've talked to a couple other kind of special interest groups. I've talked to those that are in housing development, obviously bike ped, since that's my expertise, and a couple environmental groups, that potentially having a COC that would go out to these organizations. And there are a lot of organizations that do a lot to collect information from their membership base on how they feel about the SMART train and about other issues in Marin, frankly, and have some representatives on the board that actually can go out prior to COC meetings, prior to board meetings, to collect information from the executive directors or advocacy directors of these organizations to provide feedback. I mean, I like the listening tour idea, but I mean, you're getting a lot of noise, and I'm not sure how that is collated or analyzed. But I think having the ability to have a body that collects, lucid, well thought out knowledge or information to bring back to the board is one of the advantages that this oversight committee can bring to the SMART board of directors.
Thank you, Juliet. Any other comments? David, did you have a comment? And then we'll go to Steve.
Yeah, you just real. I see two issues. I mean, I think the comment, the issue that Peter raised is true. There's a statutory responsibility, if you will, a statutory responsibility. I think that the oversight committee, just by, whatever the form that it evolves to or is going to take, can do it easily. And it's just, there is a obligation to look at the strategic plan. But what we're talking about is really more than that. It's listening. And I want to second what Steve was saying about listening first. And I think that, I would defer to Tom Lyons on the mechanics of this and the legalities. But I think less than a quorum and members of the board can be part of these listening committees as they, or these oversight functions in the future, and give the public a real opportunity apart from board meetings, COC meetings. So I mean, I think I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but I think we're going in the right direction, and we can still fulfill a responsibility, and yet need to really have some input. So thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? No, Steve?
Thank you. And thank you, by the way, for the memo. It's very helpful in clarifying a lot of these issues. I brought this up at the last meeting regarding the Measure Q and the requirements it has for the Citizens Oversight Committee. And I would agree with prior statements because it's very specific. It says what our duties are, and it has a name that is in the ballot measure, and it doesn't seem to me that that is something that we can just change on our own. I think we should have more frequent meetings, more regular meetings, perhaps twice a year, quarterly, whatever. But I think an advisory committee is really a different kind of a committee that requires different talents. And, our committee has a very specific role. And I think the financial analysis part of it could get lost in a advisory committee. But I do think that two committees would work. I have looked at what you had in terms of some of these other agencies, and it seemed to me, if I'm not wrong, that the agencies that actually operate rail systems have more than one committee. I brought up the example last time too of the Open Space District, which has a Citizens Oversight Committee. It's called Fiscal Oversight Committee, and an advisory committee. And I served on that advisory committee for many years. And they had a way of appointing people. They had some city council members from the Mayor and Councilmen's Association and so on. And supervisors appointed some. But the thing I wanted to bring up that pertains is that they have an environmental representative, which I was for many years, a business representative, a real estate representative, and an ag representative. And I'm not suggesting those exact same categories because we have a lot more different groups and interests in our around SMART. And in fact, a lot of those appeared when you talk about issues and duties in your analysis. You talk about riders and bicycle users and pedestrians and business, housing, environmental, minority or disadvantaged community areas. I mean, I think you have the basis of some of those right there. So I do think that it would be worth considering a second committee that's basically set up for the purpose of being more of a community input type of committee.
So, yeah, good.
Thank you. I'll just jump in. I agree with what Peter has said and what Steve has said, and I think we do have a responsibility based on the legislation and pretty clear. And I think that if there is more desired, there's more input from the community desired, that maybe that's a different group. I don't know that we I'm not sure that's what we certainly I didn't sign up to be
Right.
involved in the kind of the community outreach and things like that. So, there may be, since there is a specific role for the COC, that's fine. Maybe what needs to be done if people are looking for different types of input, different types of output, frankly, then maybe there is a need for a second group that's not the Citizens Oversight Committee, it's something else. Yes, Tanya.
Yeah, so I would just like to lend my support for the idea of having a second committee, a Citizens Advisory Committee. And on the topic of the listening sessions, I think that's been a great way to reach out to members of the community and the public during this period of time. And while I wouldn't maybe recommend that be an ongoing mechanism, I could envision the new Citizens Advisory Committee, or whatever that committee is called, might use that mechanism to seek broader input on particular topic areas. So if, for example, there's a major schedule change or fare change or some kind of service change that we want to get additional input on, that we could use that kind of structure to go out and do that listening. So just wanted to share that.
Good.
Right. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with everyone. I think that the need for a second committee, an advisory committee, is a great idea. Two is I think that the Citizens Oversight Committee, just by its title, again, confuses the public because they forget exactly what the duties are as it relates to Measure Q. And there's where the confusion gets, is that they really think that we're overseeing a lot more than just the strategic plan every 5 years. And that confusion somehow needs to be clarified or amplified through this process. But having, again, an advisory committee, sitting on SCTAs and actually heading that up, it's a good one. And it's one where you get a lot of different ideas, a lot of different comments. And it could be something like Julia's saying, is that, it comes in and brings some of that public back into the relationship of talking to or getting that message to the board. And the idea of talking directly to the board is great, but I think that the burden of those planning meetings and the time of staff and everybody else is got to be considered as you go through that process. But all possible, all the good stuff. Again, what the public is reaching for and looking for is additional input and avenues of communication with the smart board.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. Anyone else have anything else to say on this? Guess I'll kick it back to Farhad after those comments.
So let me summarize. So if I would report back to the board down the road, that I want to make sure I'm capturing this correctly. So COC, you folks are of the opinion that the COC as it is structured and with the duties of the strategic plan should remain intact, and that a second committee, whatever it be called, with whatever other duties should be created. Have I captured this correctly?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's okay. I just want to report. I want to make sure I'm reporting it correctly.
Okay.
So we would leave COC alone. What you do is what it's prescribed, and then we go put a new committee together, and with their duties and memberships and everything. That's the feedback from you to the board, correct?
I think that's right. I think Farhad had that, the responsibility of COC has, was laid out, and if people want more input, but maybe this is just not the right committee for it, and just a separate committee to be established that gives you the kind of input that people are looking for. I don't think it's a COC. The name Citizens Oversight Committee probably is a misnomer. I'm kind of stuck with it, I suppose, but people, I get people say, Russ, I really wish there was a different schedule. I wish I was, I said, well, that's really not our responsibility. You need to talk to the board. And so I think that type of input is what needs to go to this other committee. So
Okay.
that's
No, I mean, that's fine. That's why I wanted to just, before I turn it over to Aaron, I thought I'd just confirm that's what you want. Aaron, do you have any comments?
No, I just want to add just a little more information for everybody's, to help everyone. You aren't stuck with the name COC. The name COC is in the expenditure plan, which is approved by the board, right? So the board just approved a new expenditure plan, and they can amend the expenditure plan and change the name of your committee if they want to. They also, when they do that, and probably they will need to put a little more structure around this current COC, because there aren't bylaws and there aren't requirements for memberships or terms or anything like that, which really we should have under our Title VI plan. So there would be more structure placed around it, just so you know that in doing that. So if you thought there was a better name for this committee, you could think of some and suggest some.
And I will get you as Aaron pointed out, I'll get you the legal reading on whether the board can change your name, as Aaron said, and can they change, and whether you're in the statute or whether you're in the ballot, whether you're touched or not. I'll get you all of that information as well. But just for the record, I wanted to make one comment to Peter's comment, which he said, don't water us down. I want to make sure you're all clear. The board's intention was to expand your duties, not to water us down. So I want to make sure that that is clearly understood. The board felt that you could do more, not take away anything from you. But I clearly hear you. We're back. I'm following board's direction. When we finish the listening tours based on those comments and your comments, we'll put a staff report together. We will share with you when it goes to the board and see what the board wishes to do. I assume this is going to be done sometime early next year, as we're finishing our listening tours probably in the next couple of months. So
is it possible for you to share with us before the end of the listening tours what the requirements are of the Brown Act, so that we have a better idea of all the other things that this committee will need to comply with going forward if we are going to comply with the Brown Act?
Well, you already do comply with Brown Act, and the Brown Act is basically what you're doing today. You have an agenda, you have a staff report, and your chair calls a meeting and everybody's noticed, and so on and so forth. So,
but there's no provisions in there about what our roles and responsibilities are, conflict of interest forms that need to be filled out, because I do that for other boards.
Right now, correct. Right now, our council believes, because your official duty is only to look at the strategic plan, that this is the only thing assigned to you. If this assignment is expanded, as you suggested, goes to a different committee, then we need to write bylaws. We also will work with you if the board agrees with you. And just so you know, we're neutral. We don't have, we're just following board's direction. We do need to do, if the board agrees with you and decides to have another committee, we need to start formalizing a little bit more the COC. For example, you have no bylaws. People are appointed, it sounds like Supreme Court for life. There is no provision of somebody coming, somebody leaving, none of that. So we'll formalize that, and you be a big part of that discussion. So it won't be done behind your back. If we formalize the COC, then we come to you, say, hey, here is suggested bylaws, and here is the term, and then we work with you and go back to the board. Let me report back to the board sometime next year. Again, we'll keep you posted This is a joint attempt for us to figure out how we can get more public input and how we can disseminate information more out and hear from our communities. So that really concludes our report, Mr. Chairman, and we thank you for your time.
Okay, are we having any discussion today of operations or financing? Because I understand there's financing. Shame on me, I didn't know, but there was a financing either done or in process. Is that?
Yes, Aaron, our financial guru, can tell you everything about it.
Yeah, I can brief you on it.
Found out if you give us $200 million. Did I do good?
So we did mention this when we talked about what was going on with the budget. We talked about doing a smaller refinancing than we were hoping to do under Measure I. Measure I, the idea was to get our debt service down by increasing the amount of time we had to spread out the debt, which would have, as you know, given us lower payments on an annual basis, like you would refinance a mortgage. Right. Because Measure I didn't pass, we don't have that much time. We just have till 2029 right now. So what we're pursuing, Russ, is an advanced taxable refinancing, which allows us to issue new debt while the old debt is in place. I don't want to give you too much detail, but basically, even though the call date of the current debt is 2022, it allows us to do a refinancing now. And so we've put together a team. We did a procurement for underwriters, for bond counsel, all that kind of stuff. And we're looking at trying to get into the market now because rates are, 75% lower than they were for, if you look at the 10-year treasury rate, Russ, compared to where they were, a year ago. It's crazy, right? So right. When times are bad in the market, they're really good for this kind of refinancing. And so we are marching forward with that process. We just received affirmation of our AA rating from Standard & Poor's, as well as a new rating on the new proposed debt, partially because we are lowering our debt service. That's something that the rating agencies say that's a good thing because then it lowers the risk for investors. So for them, it's a good thing. But they also looked at we went through a process of, they, evaluated our financials, our budget. They asked a lot of questions about how the COVID impacts are affecting us. And we walked through all of that and they reaffirmed our ratings. So now that we have that, we're starting to go into the market and looking at what day, what week is the right time, because it's really dependent on the volume in the market. So, but, that's just a lot of detail of what activities we've been working on. And we had the board approve us going forward with this debt. And it's partially because we talked about this numerous times. We briefed them on it in April, and in April they gave us the go ahead. And then as part of the budget, we assumed $1 million worth of savings in debt service, in our annual budget. So it's something the board said go and do it. So that's what we're doing. And our current estimate as of last week is that we can actually save $3 million annually in debt service. So it's a good deal for us. It would help us to not only lower our current debt service, but the debt service each year. So that buys us more breathing room to survive the COVID madness, and it allows us to stabilize our plans for resuming service once the shelter-in-place order is ended. It gives us that breathing room to say, yes, we can go ahead and resume the 26 runs a day, Farhad, if that's right, and the weekend service that we really would like to restore. So that's where we are with that process. We think it's an amazing positive thing that we had no chance of doing a year ago. It's really the only kind of positive thing that's happened from COVID. It's just created this market that we're able to take advantage of. So that's the deal with that.
Yeah, Dennis,
Aaron, could you quickly clarify exactly what happens to the interest on the existing financing versus the interest on the new financing? Is there double interest? Do we have to cover both of it? What happens there?
So what happens is you do cover the payments for a couple of years, but you assume that as part of your structure, and then in 2 years it all goes away. We still have an overall pretty substantial total interest cost savings over the life of the debt. So the net present value of the savings is 6%, compared to the 3%, which is like sort of the minimum of what you would want to order in order to do such a thing. So you do because you do pay double for a couple of years, but it's still so much cheaper that you save more than it costs you, is the answer. It's a lot of municipalities are doing it right now because the tax reform measure that pushed through a year or so ago took away the ability to do this on a tax exempt basis. So a lot of governments are doing this taxable debt right now. It's a bigger market than the tax exempt market, so there's more opportunities to go out there and do this. So it's a good thing.
Aaron, is there a summary of what you're doing that you have available?
Sure.
I'm listening, but I'm not sure I'm catching everything here because.
Yeah, what I can do is right after this, I can email you the staff report, and I'll look and see if there's other information I can send you besides that.
So you'll send that to the whole.
Sure. Yeah.
See, yeah, that'd be good. Can we? And again, I guess it's not on the agenda, but is it possible to get an operations kind of summary of where things are these days? I mean, tax revenues and ridership, which I suspect is pretty low, but.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a revenue summary, and then Farhad can give you an operations summary. So our fair revenue, well, the fair revenue is tied to the ridership, which Farhad can talk about. It's extremely low and probably will come in lower than we had budgeted. We had hoped, of course, I think back in May, we were all hoping the shelter in place wouldn't last as long as it has. So we budgeted probably for higher fair revenues that are going to happen. On the other hand, our sales tax revenue, we in the budget process adjusted our sales tax expectations down significantly based on what 3 different forecasting economists were saying. You know, they were all talking about 15% decreases in fiscal year 20 and more in the years that followed. And when we finally got our fiscal year 20 sales tax revenue, it was only down a little more than 5%. So we ended up having $6 million more in FY20 for sales tax than we had anticipated as a result of COVID. So that was good news. And then we have estimates for fiscal year 21 that it'll be down another 5%, which is still lower, a smaller decrease than we budgeted. So we are anticipating, you know, we won't know until December what that first quarter looks like, but we are hoping and anticipating that our sales tax will, for our budget, will come in higher than we anticipated. So we, on the other hand, we had anticipated $16 million in federal funds through the CARES Act, and we ended up getting $14 million. So that was down. All of these shifts back and forth, really what it means is that we did a really good job during the budget process of being conservative with our revenues, and they're coming in higher. We also, during the budget process, as we briefed you back in June, I think, or in May, that we were anticipating permanent budget, well, you know, permanent as far as the budget goes, budget cuts. We eliminated vacant positions. We had the board adopt a budget that was based on this new schedule of when we reopening with fewer runs than we were running in January and February. So The result of that is that we made $7 million in budget cuts in order to shift to what we think the new reality is going to be for a while. So between the revenues coming in higher than we anticipated and the cuts that we made that were, fairly significant in terms of our service and the amount of employees we're carrying, that all of those things have put us on a very good, stable, ongoing basis, looking at our projections for the next few years. I mean, again, who knows, right? Any projection anybody makes is going to be wrong. But our estimates now, we feel like we're on solid ground, assuming, the virus starts to wane next year, that people go back to work, all those kinds of things. We feel pretty confident that we've all the right steps to do what we need to do to be sustainable through the crisis. And frankly, our model is showing that between now and 2029, we are pretty much balanced and on solid ground. So we're pretty happy with where we are with our projections, knowing what we know today, which who knows, but that's where we are. And I'll ask Farhad to talk to what's going on with operations.
Thank you.
If you check your email, I want to share something with you. Letty just send you all an email. I don't know if you have access to your email while you're on the Zoom, but the reason I'm asking you to do that is to see if you're interested. Every week, we provide this to senior staff and board directors, as well as this is what we post, which is our daily ridership. And then this particular table, we show you what was happening before COVID-19. And then you see the crash of the transit users. And then you see how every week it's been picking up and then goes down a little bit, then comes up. So let me know if this is of an interest to you. I'll be happy to send this to you as well every week. We typically release this on Tuesday and add to the bottom of it the ridership from the week before.
I would like to see it.
I'm sorry?
I would like to receive it, yes.
Did
Sure.
you get it, Tanya?
Yes, I did, and I would like to get it on a regular basis.
Sure, no problem. I'll put COC on the mailing list. So, but to answer the chairman's, Ross, basically where we are is, if you would look at about 3,000 a day when Larkspur was open, it went down to almost nothing. And we're no different, as you know, of every single transit agency and ferry agency. Most transit agencies now report that they have recovered about 15%. So we're between 80, 85% of what we used to be. Ferries are in particular hurt the most. They're still 99% down. Bridge tolls, we are told between San Rafael and Bay Bridge and some of the other bridge accounts, they're getting about 40, 50% back. So there's clearly movement. For us, as you can see, we're within the low 400s to the high 400s, and very strong on the bicycle. We continue having, before COVID, 10% of our riders were bicycles, and now they're somewhere around 25%. So clearly it's the choice by bicyclists to do their first last mile. And that's really where we are. We're on a standby to see when the economy opens up so we can go back to more normal. On weekend, as you know, we have no service because there is no ferry, there is nothing, nowhere to go. But we are ready to open up on weekend with 48-hour notice. So we're very eager actually to open that up. I talk to my colleagues at Golden Gate every couple of weeks, say, Dennis, what do you think? Are we ready for a weekend? And so we're all keeping our fingers crossed. I think the big event for the weekend will be San Francisco opening, ballparks opening. You kind of need a big movement for weekend, and then we're ready to open. Right now, we are beginning to have overcrowding in some of our evening commutes coming northbound. conductors report to me. They reported to me last night, a couple of the train is getting a capacity. So we're gonna start either adding a third car or adding more trips. So we clearly see a movement of the economy, at least from our point of view. We clearly see there is a movement. You know, thanks to the COVID-19, the CARES Act money, we didn't lay off anybody, so we're in an excellent position to expand service immediately, where some agencies laid off people and when things open up have to go through the process. So far so good. And we're in good shape till December. Hopefully the politicians in DC will quit fighting and agree on another stimulus package, which can give us many, many more months until the economy opens up. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Farhad, if it goes well beyond, you know, I mean, everything you read about the vaccine, and some people say it's going to begin by the first of the year. Others say we're not going to have anything till the third quarter. I mean, if this gets if we're really into this until the middle of the year, do you foresee layoffs and you know, things of that nature? You know, who knows if the politicians will actually agree on anything? But
so let's divide the problem. So let's, under the scenario that there is no stimulus, right? We have to make that assumption. So if there is a stimulus and if it is used the same way it was done before, it will give us another 6 to 12 months of breathing room, right? If there is no stimulus package, and if the ridership continues like now, so let's say we're in spring and we see down the road that there is no relief inside, then yes, I have to put a budget together. And you know, I don't have Erin anymore. The new CFO, she and I need to put a budget together, anticipate, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to exhaust our reserves, right? We want to have a balancing act between keeping staff on and having reserve. But so it's going to be, I don't see under the two scenarios that you ask that we do not go through some sort of a reduction in force. So no stimulus and no vaccine, and the economy continues to be this way. I just don't see a way out of it. But you guys will have meetings, you know, and I'll come to you and we'll kind of have a together and come up with ideas. The difficulty for railroad, it's important for you to know this. The biggest cost of us is the operations section, right? That's where we have the highest number of people. These guys are very, very highly trained, licensed, and you do not get rid of an engineer conductor or a vehicle maintenance on the train side or a signal maintenance on the train side or a specialist on positive train control. Let them go, and then when you're ready to hire them, you get them back. These people will go back Midwest to Florida where other major railroads are. To give you an idea, if we lay off people, and I'm saying we might have to, but if we lay off people, from the time I hire somebody till he or she can touch a train, whether driving it or maintaining it or touch the signal, we're looking at 4 to 6 months on site.
Wow.
Because they have to recertify and go through the whole process. So for that reason, we reported to the board that we cannot rush and lay off people. So they're not bus drivers. I don't mean, I'm not downgrading anybody, but they're not bus drivers. You know, they're not general managers. You can hire general manager any day. You can hire bus driver much easier than you can hire engineer conductor or a signal technician for train. So that's the difficulty. But if it comes to that, those are the choices that we have to that we have to deal with. And also reminding you that contracting out was prohibited in our legislation. That's why early on we had to staff up because we could not contract out. That provision is now gone, and that could be one of the discussions down the road. If we end up laying off people, then we will evaluate that as well.
Anybody have a question for Farhad? Yes, Steve.
So we are meeting virtually, and I think a number of organizations have discovered that virtual meetings work quite well. How does that change the overall projection of ridership looking, say, 5 years into the future?
You know, it's impossible. Anybody who tries to project anything during COVID-19 or post-COVID-19, I want to hire that person if they know what we're talking about. We don't know. I mean, you guys know better than me. Every week, something changes. You know, so there is no projection. I think we need, but let's make sure we agree on one thing. We don't have an economic crisis. We have a pandemic, a health crisis that is forcing the economy to behave this way.
Yeah.
Good.
See what I'm
Good.
saying? So this is very important because the last time in 2008-9, we saw economy collapsing over a year and a half, and it took whatever, a couple of years to recover. This is a pandemic crisis that if this pandemic goes away, the economy fundamental remains strong. We believe in that. I'll be happy, you know, I'll be very interested to hear Ross's point of view. So this is different than last time. This is a health crisis, and that's what vaccine and all the other therapeutics, I think, you know, I'm a big believer of a V-shaped recovery after all the health issues is taken care of.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Farhad. And you know, when you talk about, when we look at, and from the bank's perspective, we look at our customer base, much of our base is doing just fine. It's those that are involved in, you know, hospitality, transportation, things where, you know, entertainment, where you have a lot of people congregating, and just I think once we get through this, the economy will come back, because I don't think it's been affected, as you say. This is not an economic crisis. This is a health crisis, which has caused the economy to react this way. But once we get back, the question is when we get back, right? I wish somebody knew that exactly when that was. But and who knows how virtual meetings and things are going to change the future. I will tell you this, you know, this has been a time when, you know, and certainly in our business, we do everything this way now. And people are not working at the office, they're working remotely. But, you know, everybody I talk to can't wait to go back to the office.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is going to be I don't think it's going to be a sea change of the way we operate. I think there will be some change. You will be able to have more people remote than you do now because we've adapted. But the socialization of working with others and seeing them, I think people will go back to a more normal time, and, you know, SMART and other transportation modes will come right back, and we'll get gridlock on the freeway again. So I think that's anyway. Any other questions or comments or issues we need to discuss at this point?
Russ, just a comment. I realized I don't think when we concluded the last agenda item on the COC role, I don't know that we offered time for public comment. So just being mindful that we do have a couple folks listening in, that if they do want to make a comment, we might want to do that before we close. So.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Is there anyone that has from the public that has a comment? Just looking at the list. I don't actually see it in the participants.
Yeah, I can see on the attendee list, there's three folks.
At this time, we don't show anybody raising their hand to indicate that they want to provide comment.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Peter, you had another comment?
Yeah, I just had an observation of the listening sessions, and it just might be of interest. The northern listening sessions have been very actively participated in. There's a lot of input, there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of questions. And the questions revolve around mostly when are we going to get service and when are we going to have more continuation of the program. The most recent one, which was last night, there were 3 speakers, of which 2 of them probably took up about 80%, which is fine. And they were comments about the wonderment of SMART, which is good. So what I'm saying is an observation is that the people who don't have the service are obviously much more concerned, and the people who have the service, Southern Marin, it seems to be rather mellow. So I don't know how, it's just an observation. So, you know, busy people, not busy people, it's showing up in those sessions, I think. Anyway, just an observation.
Okay, thank you. David, did you have a comment?
No, well, not really. I mean, since you asked, though, I mean, an observation, and that is, you mentioned that there's 3 participants for this meeting, and I know one of them that you mentioned at first was Mr. Swearengin from Friends of Smart. And I was going to observe that when the board is thinking about whether it's an expanded COC or a new SMART advisory committee, that as far as, you know, input from recognized groups, I want to put a word in for Friends of Smart because, you know, they pay attention to everything, they follow everything, they don't have any hidden agenda, and I just want to say that if to the extent that some organizational input is desired, I think that would be a good start. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there's no other comments, no other issues, I think that wraps it up, correct? Farhad, did you have anything else, or is that it?
No, thank you for your time and stay healthy, everybody.
Thank you. So with that, I can do have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Okay.
In favor.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We didn't say.
Thank you, everyone.